Good morning. Well, when we talk of the frontiers of knowledge, we also have to assume and know what is going to be in store for us. We hear every day the danger from terrorism. We hear every day that the wars are harmful. But the biggest danger today is so prominent and so often ignored. Ignored by the political leaders, ignored by the economists, willfully ignored by the scientists and the doctors, and ignored by you. This is the danger which is facing us. This is a danger which is causing every year 700,000 people die. 700,000 people die. And it's expected by 2015, 10 million people will die a year. Are you shocked? Well, this is the antibiotic use. We have been thinking that antibiotics are panacea for all our troubles, all our diseases. And there has been so much of intake of antibiotics that we have developed immunity to that. And most of the antibiotics are not effective any longer. The bacteria and microbes have developed a resistance to them. And now the report comes from WHO just yesterday that there are new 12 superbugs that cannot be treated by any antibiotic. Imagine. And antibiotics are not only used by the human beings. They are overused in farming and in medicine. With the result that what was once a miracle drug is now an instrument of death. 1928 was a watershed in the history of medicine when Sir Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin. And now antibiotics and antimicrobials have been protecting people. They have protected millions of people. But now there is an overuse. Are you aware that 200,000 babies die every year as a result of overuse of the antibiotics? So the biggest danger is not from terrorism. It's not from war. It is from antibiotics use and their overuse having rendered us absolutely open to the new diseases. You know, we have been building this civilization, the modern civilization, and they have been building blocks. And these building blocks, antibiotics played a major role. But the repeated calls on these antibiotics made the body accept them. At one time, you know, that DDT was very effective against mosquitoes. Now it's no longer effective on mosquitoes, but its use is definitely harmful to the human beings. You see, the changed perception of the human beings are the biggest problem. Microorganisms are good for public good. They make earth livable. But our human perceptions do not reflect their use. WHO had a survey of 12 countries and they found that 12% people believe that antibiotics work for viral infections like flu and cold. Now, this is wrong. And unfortunately, the doctors are the biggest culprits in this. You have a bad cold and immediately they prescribe you antibiotics, especially in countries like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Indonesia and others, Africa. And the doctors reach for the antibiotics without appreciating the cost of antimicrobial resistance that would result from that. UNO is aware of that. WHO reports are becoming public. But I'm amazed that they meet so often. The Philippines dictator, whom they call dictator, the president, wants to finish off the drug dealers. And there are special sessions of the General Assembly that human rights are being violated. And a couple of drug dealers have been killed. But here 700,000 people are killed every day. And there is not a murmur. The holy principles of the Security Council and General Assembly are absolutely deaf, dumb, mute. And without action, can you believe that antibiotics being used in agriculture are increasing by 50% every year, especially in India, China and South Africa? And you would may be amazed that all efforts to curb the use of antibiotics would fail. Would fail because of the pharmaceutical companies. Are you aware that pharmaceutical companies, according to 1998 estimate, and that's an old one, you can add at least 10% to that these pharmaceutical companies spend more than $1 billion every year on marketing the antibiotics. So naturally they have to sell the antibiotics, and the doctors are the willing tools to prescribe them. And the political leaders look at the whole situation as if they are robots and cannot do anything. And the result is disaster. Have you ever seen a pharmaceutical ad? They'll say X is useful for this. And then they come on with a list of the side effects. And the side effects are so many that imagination staggers. That can any sensible doctor prescribe these medicines, these antibiotics, in good faith and in good conscience? So the first step has to be that the doctors and the pharmaceutical companies have to be accountable to the society. And they have got to see that there is no misuse of antibiotics. Until we change our perceptions and curb the use, we will not be able to do anything. And the result would be that the human beings will continue to be sacrificed in the interest of the pharmaceutical industry. You have to have global goals. MDG came, Millennium Development Goals. Then came SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. But then none of them contained anything about the human health. And this global challenge that is facing us, the terror of the antibiotics and the dangers of the use of antibiotics should have been one of the sustainable. How can you sustain life if the life is not there? As the WHO itself admits, 700,000 people die every day, and by 2050, 50 million people will die extra than these 700,000 people. And yet, this is the beginning of the end of antibiotics. But if the antibiotics are gone, then what do we do? Already the superbugs are operating. And when the superbug afflicts you, 50% chances are that you will die. Anybody suffering from superbug. Because no antibiotic, no medication would affect superbug. And the superbugs are the creation because of the overuse and the indiscriminate use of the antibiotics. Have you ever imagined that people have stopped using antibiotics because they know it's not there? It's not there for any good. $100 trillion is the worth of the pharmaceutical industry. And about 60% of that industry is dependent on antibiotics. So they want to maintain their economic regime. And they don't care that 700,000 people die. They don't care that 50 million people die. They don't care that 200,000 babies die every year. This is the first time that 12 superbugs are identified. But then there may be many which are not identified, are beyond the scope of identification. We don't have the means to identify them. So what do we do? The first is WHO has to find, in consultation with the research people, ways to fight the tide of antibiotic resistance. You have to ensure that the resistance to the antibiotic ends. Secondly, curb the use. As a matter of fact, all the countries adopted good practices for the prescription of antibiotics. In number of antibiotic resistant cases will come down and the number of fatalities would decrease. So we have to find out new diagnostics and better antibiotics, and this has to be done in a hurry. Otherwise, the terror of the superbugs would be more dangerous, more life-taking than the terror by any religious group or by any criminal group. Unfortunately, we have not taken any decision till now. As I said, General Assembly, Security Council are quiet. G7, G8, G20 countries, they meet and discuss things which have no meaning, but ignore this major issue. You know, there's an E. coli resistance, cholesterol, and there it used to be susceptible to antibiotics. And the news has just come from Pennsylvania that a 49-year-old lady died from E. coli because the antibiotic given to her, cholesterol, no longer works. So another antibiotic found to be bad or useless, and yet it will be prescribed. The doctors will keep on prescribing it. Needless to say that the stakes are very high. Needless to say that the worship of money by the pharmaceutical industry and the greed of the doctors and the ignorance of the patient, all of them have combined to create this scourge of overuse of antibiotics, especially, as I said, in the emerging economies. Luckily, in places like Canada, USA, and enlightened health services like in Europe, antibiotics are prescribed but carefully. However, there is no visa system for the migration of superbugs from one place to another. So they can come without any visa. There are no borders for them. So what is required is action on war footing at different levels. Research, education, care. Under prescription, not over prescription. There may be hope, but I said, this is the biggest challenge, global challenge today facing the world. Let's see whether any political leader will take up the lead. I doubt it. But you can make them do it. You are the representatives of yourself. You know that? At one time it used to be said, vox populi vox Dei. Voice of the people is the voice of God. So assert yourself, tell your leaders, tell your doctors to wake up. Because until and unless they wake up along with you waking up, the future is well nigh dark. Act today, act now. Thank you.